What's up, everybody? Welcome back to All Things Nerdy Podcast with Nate and Joe. I'm Nate. That's Joe. Oh, I got it right. Sweet. That's Joe. Today we have a super fun topic. It's one of those topics that you either just don't really know, haven't talked about, or you love. There's really no in between. It's either just part of who you are as a person, or it's just something you just don't really care about. I'm one of those people. I don't know much about it, but I'm excited to talk about it and learn a lot about it today. But again, we got Mike. He's been a fan since he was a kid, so I'm excited to talk about it. Joe?
Yeah, so definitely watched wrestling growing up. Power bombed brothers and sisters, that kind of thing. So super excited to hear somebody talk about it. But without further ado, Mike, talk nerdy to us.
Thanks, guys. Again, my name's Mike Galasso. Happy to be here and talk about this with all of you. As Joe and Nate mentioned, I've been a fan since I was a kid. I remember being little and seeing it on TV and watching like Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior, all those people that everyone who has kind of faded out remember back from like their 80s and early 90s. And then I got hooked even further in the mid 90s with Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Mankind, all that. Oh yeah, exactly. And all of us throughout college have done some chugging of beers like Stone Cold for sure. And then, as I kind of got older, as I explained to you guys a little bit earlier, is that I kind of saw it as a guilty pleasure for a little while. And then as I got older, I just kind of leaned into it more for my bachelor party before I got married. We actually went out to Dallas and went to WrestleMania out there in Texas in the giant stadium at Cowboy Stadium with, they said like 110,000 people were there or something, the largest crowd in the history of a wrestling show. They like to inflate their numbers a little bit, but there was probably a good 90 to 100,000 people probably there that day, which was really cool, really fun experience, kind of like a bucket list thing for any pro wrestling fan.
Well, as someone that doesn't know a ton about wrestling, I know a lot of them are like they're cultural things, right? Like I know the woo of Ric Flair, and I know
You can't see me.
I know that just from what was it, Peacemaker, whatever.
John Cena. So John Cena, yeah.
Yeah. And then my favorite, like you said, college, Stone Cold Steve Austin, just probably one of my favorite videos going around social media right now is that kid that walks into the pool and the whole family's like, "Don't do it," and he takes 2 glass beers. It's just
I did see that one, yeah, and it's just glass everywhere on the floor.
Oh, we got a comment from Steven. Says WrestleMania parties back in the day, 547 Mason Street.
So yeah, back in college, we would order WrestleMania and go over to the one house and sit there and have a bunch of Steve Weisers or Budweisers sitting there in the case in a cooler and just sit and watch WrestleMania for the 4 or 5 hours, whatever it was. So it was a good time.
So Mike, let's go back, man. You said you watched it when you were a kid. What was it that pulled you into wrestling?
So back then, probably when I was little with the Hulk Hogans and Ultimate Warrior, they were all just kind of like superheroes, kind of like a comic book, kind of like, cartoons and comics. They were just kind of over the top superhero characters with these, bad villain guys that you hated as a kid. You wanted to see those people get their justice and, get beat by these heroes, Hulk Hogan telling you to say your prayers, take your vitamins, do all that kind of stuff. And Ultimate Warrior is just like an uncaged animal running around like crazy. So as like a 5 and a 6-year-old, that's like really cool to see on TV. Like, oh yeah, that guy's acting like me. I run around crazy like that. Awesome, cool.
That's awesome. And I just want to show the people. So my wife just texted me. So I'm in my wife's sister's room back at their house to do this.
Oh, it says John Cena.
Yeah.
John Cena elbow grease, a book. So my wife's sister just randomly has this book on her like desk. My wife texts me. She's like, "Look to your left. There's a John Cena book." I'm like, "What in the world?"
Yeah, it shows like the crossover power that some of these wrestlers end up having, like The Rock and John Cena, Hulk Hogan. Like they've gone into a bunch of different avenues. Like The Rock's the highest grossing actor in the world now, or something crazy like that. So,
wow. We got a comment from Kevin. Says, "Did I miss Hulk and Animal?" Which one is the Animal?
So there was the Road Warriors with Hawk and Animal. They were a tag team. They used to wear the football pads with the spikes and everything. Okay. Yeah, so those were the Road Warriors.
One of the craziest ones that I remember like watching it when I was younger was like the guy who had the sock on his hand. And he would
Mick
take it
Foley.
out.
Mr. Sacco, yes, yeah. Which
And
was all just kind of interesting. He tells the story that he came up with it just randomly out of nowhere because he just wanted to do something fun and stupid. So he just took a sock and drew a face on it, and it just connected with everyone. And so he was like, "Oh, this is sticking around now. Like this is happening."
it's like now I'm the dude with the soccer man.
Yeah,
That's who I am now.
I'm familiar with him. Back in the day, growing up, we had N64, and there was a wrestling game that we would play on the N64, and I'd pick that dude sometimes. Mankind, I think it was. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Kevin said it looked like Guar, and then Dude Love.
Yeah, so Mick Foley had like 3 or 4 different personalities that he would do. So Dude Love was one of them, where he was like this hippie, like who he thought like when he was a kid was like who would get all the ladies. And then he had Mankind with the weird mask and everything, and then he had Cactus Jack, which was his more like hardcore persona, which he did like on different independent promotions where he'd like do barbed wire matches, wrestling on explosives and all this other stuff in Japan, and they called them death matches. But in Japan, where the ropes were made of barbed wire, you were going through thumbtacks, you had like a bed of nails that you would get slammed on, barbed wire around a bat you'd get hit with. Yeah, there's some crazy matches that happen around the world when it comes to pro wrestling.
I think that's the biggest stigma that follows like pro wrestling is that it's fake, and where it is scripted, right? Like there's a story and there's entertainment to it. Like your body being slammed, that's not fake. I mean, like some of the slaps and stuff, whatever, but like jumping on barbed wire, being hit with barbed wire, stuff like that, you can't. I mean, you can't fake some of that. I mean,
you can't fake any of that. And the ring itself, while there's some give to it, it's still just like plywood under there. It's like there's a little bit of a give to it, but you're still slamming on hard plywood all the time. Like it's not easy. That's why a lot of these guys are done by the time they're in their late 30s, early 40s. Now that like there's been advancements in medicine and they're actually taking care of their bodies, like they can go a little bit longer than they used to do. But it's crazy how many injuries these people get. How short their careers really are.
Jeremy Cox comes in with the style and profile of limousine riding, jet flying, kiss stealing.
With the comment, even Ric Flair still had a match last year.
Hey, Mike, I think you're breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure what's happening. We might be having some technical difficulties. Mike, are you back with us? I see you moving now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I can hear you.
There we go.
All right. So you froze through most of that. I heard Ric Flair, and that was it.
Oh, so I was going with the comment. He's commenting about Ric Flair. Even Ric Flair had a match last year in the 70s. Now, it was not the most entertaining thing in the world, but he's still out there doing it. Like it's nuts that some of these guys just never get away from doing what they love.
So I got 2 questions for you. Let's go old school. Who's your favorite old school wrestler? And then let's go new school right now. Who's your favorite new school wrestler?
So my favorite wrestler of all time is Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid. He's arguably the best to ever do it. It depends on who you talk to.
Tune up the band.
Exactly, Sweet Chin Music. And right now, my favorite wrestler is probably Seth Rollins. I don't know if you guys have heard of him or seen him. His character's completely over the top and completely just leaned into being this weird, absurd, like wears all the trendy clothes that are gaudy and weird looking, but in the ring he can do a lot of cool stuff, and it's fun to watch his matches.
Okay. When you said Shawn Michaels, like I think like DX, him and Triple H, just that whole...
that's a con.
The crotch chop is what they call it. Yeah.
Yep.
So the weird story is now both of them are pretty much running WWE. So Triple H is now pretty much in charge of the main roster of WWE. He ended up marrying Vince McMahon's daughter, Stephanie. She was on the show back in the Attitude Era as well. And so Vince was kicked out for a little bit due to some off the field issues, I guess you could say. And so Triple H kind of took over leading the main roster, and they have a developmental brand that's called NXT that Shawn Michaels is the head of. So the 2 guys who ran DX or were in DX are now in charge of pretty much all of talent in WWE. It's kind of crazy that their careers have kind of come full circle that way.
I did not know that. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, what nights do you watch wrestling, and what channel do they come on? And I know channels are going to be different for everyone, but like what?
Yeah. So it's with 2 kids, it's hard to catch it all the time, obviously. But so they still have Monday Night Raw for WWE. They are on Mondays on the USA Network from 8 to 11. It's 3 hours. Then they have Friday Night SmackDown, which is on regular Fox from 8 to 10. And then there's another promotion that's kind of the competition with WWE now, called AEW, or All Elite Wrestling. They're on Wednesday nights on TBS, and then on Saturdays, I believe, on TBS. It might be TBS or TNT, I forget. They kind of bounce back and forth depending on what sports are going on with that channel, because they have NHL and NBA stuff. So yeah, those when they're on every week. And then WWE has a contract with Peacock Network, where if you get like their subscription, all of those pay-per-views are now free if you have the subscription to Peacock, if you pay for it. So all of the WrestleManias, the Royal Rumbles, the Money in the Banks, if you pay for it, you get those just through Peacock, and you can stream them. They have the library of all the old matches back from, you guys probably remember, from the 90s and the 80s. They have a huge library of stuff that you can watch going back
really
30,
cool.
40 years. If you're really into it, it's a paradise where you can spend hours on end watching old matches.
That is pretty cool. Is there one match that sticks out to you? Like, this is the match of all matches, like the greatest match you've ever seen?
So that is a tough question. My favorite match of all time, which some people will argue with me, is probably the first ever Iron Man match with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart back from WrestleMania 12, I believe it was, I think, or 11, I forget which one it was. It's a classic match that kind of just like started what I deem like the uptick in professional wrestling, and what got me more and more into it at that point too. So personally, it has a lot of interest for me. And there's been a ton of other great ones over the past few years. If you give like the different like crazy kind of genre matches, like everyone remembers the Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker and Mankind, when Undertaker threw him off the top of the cage and he landed through the table. Like, that was now 20 years ago. They actually made a whole video celebrating the 20th anniversary of it, where Undertaker and Mankind got together and watched it together for like the first time or something nuts like that. So there's really not just one match, but there's all these different matches throughout like the chronological time that has happened, where I could pick out and say, yeah, no, go watch that one, it's really good, or go watch this one.
Oh, Steven comes in with the Shawn Michaels I'm Sorry match.
Yeah, so that was Ric Flair's first retirement match in 2008, where he wrestled Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. So the stipulation was that if Ric Flair lost, he had to retire. And so Shawn, who was his friend at the time, storyline-wise and in real life, was the one to beat him. So before hitting them with one last sweet chin music, he looked at him and said, "I'm sorry, I love you," and kicked him right in the face. And that was the end of the match. So that the over-dramatization of it was definitely out there for that one.
Yeah. I mean, I bet that was heart-wrenching to a lot of like long-term OGs who absolutely love Flair,
Oh,
and
yeah,
Shawn
yeah.
Michaels, like proper send-off, lighting the torch before we push him into the water kind of thing,
Yeah. I always joke around that pro wrestling is kind of a soap opera for men, but I mean that they can get behind, because there is the storylines and everything that people really enjoy, and then you have the other fans who really enjoy the actual in the ring stuff. But the more shows that I go to, and the more that I see, there are a lot of female fans too, and a lot of fans that are kids. So it's still kind of like a kids game, and it's starting to expand more and more as it grows in popularity. It gets to be a little bit more mainstream, like it was in the 90s.
Kevin said, anytime Paul Bearer came out. I'm not familiar with that one.
So Paul Bearer was the manager of The Undertaker. He was the one who carried the urn to the ring, and his voice was just crazy, just off the wall. I cannot do an impression of it, but it was
Let us hear your best effort, though.
No, there's no chance. I think that dog in the background would be barking even way more with the high shrillness of what that was.
Oh man, I remember a lot of like the Hardy Boys, just because they were so out there.
Yeah,
like a lot of their matches were like involving ladders, so they'd just be climbing to the top of ladders and get pushed off, or jump off and like dive on top of someone, that kind of stuff. It was just like risky kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
So the Hardy Boys were kind of right around the end of the 90s, early 2000s, and the push into all these kind of revolutionary matches with the ladders, or the TLC matches, the table ladders and chairs matches with Edge and Christian, and then the Dudley Boys as well. They kind of pushed that envelope for tag team wrestling, and a lot of those guys were young, just trying to make their mark in the industry, and they were like, oh, we have this opportunity here in front of us, let's go nuts with this. So they were jumping off of these 20-foot ladders onto the concrete. They were doing swan dives off of them into the ring to somebody on the ground or through a table and all of that, and they made their mark that way. And the Hardy Boys are still both wrestling for All Elite Wrestling now. They're both in their like mid 40s or so, and still a tag team there. Yeah, they're more of a what they call a nostalgia act at this point. It's people kind of reliving the glory days while watching them, but they still have some juice left in the tank. They're still fun to watch, and I enjoy seeing them from time to time on there.
We got a comment from Jeremy. It says favorite signature move and your favorite entrance.
Oh, so favorite entrance, even though it's long and it gets kind of boring, the Undertaker is still the best entrance when you're there in person. Like all the lights go out, the gong that hits, and you can still feel it. Like it gives you chills to experience, because everyone remembers the Undertaker from being a kid watching him do the slow walk to the ring. So after about 5 minutes, that does wear off a little bit, but it's still cool just to experience that first part of it when everything goes dark, everyone goes nuts. And so when I went to WrestleMania in Dallas, Stone Cold Steve Austin made a surprise appearance too. So when that glass shattered, everybody went nuts. It's the loudest I've ever heard a crowd in my entire life. Like he still gets that reaction from people. It was really, really cool. And signature move, I'm probably going to have to say the super kick, Sweet Chin Music from Shawn Michaels again. I know I'm just kind of answering with my favorite wrestler, but yeah.
Oh, Kevin puts in Hacksaw Jim Duggan costume was a 2x4, but he sold it. I don't know who that is, but that sounds pretty funny.
Yeah, Hacksaw Jim Duggan just carried a 2x4 to the ring with him and an American flag and just yelled "ho" at the top of his lungs with a thumb up. And that was his whole shtick, and it worked. Everyone loved it and chanted USA. It worked really well.
I guess it's the same thing with the sock. Like it's just, hey, he thought of it.
It's the most obscure things that you would never think that people would enjoy that people like. Like I remember a few years ago, there was a character on WWE called The Miz who was kind of pushing. He was pushing to be an actor. So one guy they gave him. Yes, exactly. And he was on The Real World back in the day. So it's a cool little like real world story, real life story that he, worked to be this WWE champion. So his persona was that he was this big Hollywood actor. So they gave him what they deemed a stunt double, and it was another professional wrestler. And so literally the guy would just do exactly what was happening to Miz in the ring on the outside. So if he was getting slammed, he would somehow get himself up and slam himself or like flip over and all this other stuff. It was so absurd, but it was so hilarious, and everyone loved it. Just because of the absurdity of it and the stupidity of it at the same time. It was amazing.
Could you imagine trying out for that job? Like, yeah, I would love to like invisibly slam myself over and over to mimic what's happening to another person.
And it was so great. It was amazing because it is just like, it was like, yeah, no, the guy bought in and he was like, yeah, I'm going to do this the best that I can and be over the top and have fun with this. And everyone loved him for it. It was great.
All right, show me how you take a chair to the face, but we're not actually going to hit you with the chair.
Gotcha. Yeah, you have to fake it. Go.
I've been watching a lot of videos on like Instagram and stuff, especially after I knew you were going to be a guest. I tried to look up some things and stuff like that. And I will say, like, the selling of it, the theatrics of it, the costumes, like all of that is a much, much larger part. Like people think of wrestling and they're like, oh, their theatrics, their wrestling, but like so much goes into it and there's so many details that go into it. And even the storylines and character arcs are all very well thought out and things like that. It is like a live action show, like you said, like soap opera, Yeah.
So WWE coined the term sports entertainment is what they call it, more than pro wrestling anymore, because they know it's a show. They know they're there for an entertainment value. And what I find really cool about being a wrestling fan is you're actually kind of a part of the show if you're there in person, with how you react to what they're doing, the chants that you do, and all the stuff. The people in the ring, the wrestlers, can feed off of that and kind of see how their match is going and know what to do, and they can play to the crowd for a reaction. It's fun to be like a part of the show pretty much when you're there. And even as a fan at home, if you don't get to go to a show, how you react online, on Twitter, on Instagram, and all that other stuff, it gets taken into account for what decisions they make moving forward, or how a term they use is over a wrestler is with the fans, how much fans like them or dislike them. How over they are with fans is based on where their character goes. Because if you're not getting a reaction out there as a pro wrestler, you're not doing your job. So it's fun to be a fan and be involved in the process.
That's pretty cool. How many shows do you go to a year, do you think?
Not as so. When they used to run through Richmond in the Coliseum, I was able to go a little bit easier when I had kids. Now that since I had kids, I can't really travel for them. I used to go up to DC for them and watch them about twice a year. So I was going about 3 or 4 times a year back when I could. Now if I get to one, it's good. But plans for WrestleMania next year is in Philadelphia, so I'm gonna probably drive up there for that for sure, since it's close enough for me to drive to.
Nice.
Cool.
I might be living in Philly sometime next year.
Oh, nice.
Just a fun fact for you.
Yeah.
You gonna hit up WrestleMania, Nate?
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, maybe if I'm invited. I don't know if I'll go at my own free will, but
so it's actually really cool because, like, as you guys understand with like comic convention and all that stuff, for the big shows like the WrestleManias, the SummerSlams, the Royal Rumbles, they do like a convention around it. So people from all over the world fly in to where it is to go to this show, and they're there for a whole weekend, and it's a bunch of like-minded people that are big fans hanging out all over the place at other stuff, at different bars or whatever. When I went to WrestleMania, like, everyone was just wearing like wrestling shirts around and like hanging out at a bar, drinking, having a good time, and like talking about wrestling. And it's a very convention-like atmosphere for shows like that. So if you're a newbie or you like want to see how crazy it can get, it's fun people watching at the minimum.
I think that's a great segue, great transition, bringing up newbies. So, like, it takes someone like me who I know a little bit, just from growing up. I grew up in the South in Alabama, had a lot of friends that are big wrestling fans and things like that. But if I wanted to figure out how to become, more interested and get into this hobby, what would your suggestion be?
I would start by watching what's on TV first, and just seeing, what you kind of gravitate to, or what people you gravitate to when you're watching, if you enjoy it. And then you can go kind of find old matches online on YouTube, on Instagram, and there's a plethora of different online personalities that talk about wrestling as well, that are podcasts, that are YouTube channels. Cultaholic is one that I've followed since they started out. That's a really good YouTube channel that talks wrestling, and Wrestle Talk as well on YouTube is a great one to watch if you want to try and learn some stuff there. But yeah, just start out with the TV shows that are on, and try and find people that you enjoy watching, either what they do in the ring or the way they talk on the microphone.
We actually got a comment from Ryan. Says, what got me into it was the games. WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game. Played it like crazy at our cousin's house, and finally got the Super Nintendo WWF Super WrestleMania, where I always played Hulk and Animals. So I guess games would be a good segue too. If you like,
and that as well, yeah.
Games.
So WWE puts out a game. They have a contract with 2K Sports, so every year there's a new version of the WWE game that comes out. And AEW actually just put out their first video game a couple weeks ago. I don't have it yet. I do want to get it eventually, but it's supposed to be a throwback to more of those old style wrestling games from like the N64 era that you guys probably remember. So it's supposed to be pretty cool in that respect.
Awesome. Question for you, side note, what system do you play on?
Right now, I still only have a PS4. I still need to get a PS5. Again, I have kids, so I don't have a lot of time to play as much as I used to. I'm still working on the last God of War that came out, slowly making my way through that. So that's what I'm working on now.
All right, I had to ask. But so getting back to wrestling, do you prefer WWE or AEW?
So they're kind of different. Again, so AEW ended up starting because there was this like grassroots campaign from what they call the internet wrestling community, or the IWC, that is more mid to late 20s guys, early 30s guys that still enjoy wrestling, that want to see good fun matches. So a lot of the independent guys got together and decided they were going to start their own company. And so they got some funding from Tony Khan, who is the son of Shad Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they made this new promotion to do that, to have something else to go watch besides WWE, because they were the only game in town since WCW and ECW went under in the early 2000s. So they're kind of the counterculture to WWE. So if you want to see some high flying spots or some crazy things that you never thought you would see done in a wrestling ring, AEW's kind of your ticket to go to. And then WWE, you're going to get what everyone kind of remembers with the storylines. It's more pushed to like the family aspect, the family dynamic, which my wife still says I'm an idiot for saying that because all they do is yell and hit each other. How can it be pushed to families? But it's still the old school storylines that you're going to get, and it's what you're used to in WWE. If you're new, I would probably start with WWE just as an introductory lesson into what the entertainment value of it is. And if you start to like what everyone's doing in the ring, go check out AEW. Go take a look at it. I actually went to AEW's first.
Oh, he froze. We'll get him back in a second. Joe, who's your favorite wrestler?
My favorite wrestler, let's see. I mean, I would have to say probably The Rock. I mean,
that feels like a cop-out answer, Joe.
No,
it's the easy one. It is. Yeah.
No, he was the main like guy on the stage. Like when I was actually watching wrestling as a kid, like I did the rock bottom on my brothers and sisters all the time, threw in the people's elbow, like, and then he transitioned into the movies and stuff. So like he almost kind of grew with us, right? Like he went out of wrestling, got into the movies that I now watch. So he's always been around.
Mike, who are the?
Question,
Go ahead, Joe.
I'll say I had a question for Mike. We've talked about a lot about his favorites and like that kind of stuff, but a big part of wrestling is who do you hate? Who do you not want to win? So my question is, who's your least favorite wrestler?
So
old
it's
school and current.
So old school, like I mean, the correct answer is Vince McMahon. When in the Attitude Era, when he was going against Stone Cold Steve Austin, everybody hated Vince. He was the boss that everyone had at a job. Even as a kid, he was like the school teacher that you hated, that was in charge and you had to listen to him. So that's probably my most hated person from the time in wrestling, but it means he was doing his job right and it was really good. And right now, the one that I dislike the most is probably The Miz, which means he's doing his job right too. Like he's just this obnoxious character that he's nothing flashy. He hasn't changed who he is in years, but he does such a good job at it that you just love to hate him.
Yeah. We got a comment from Kevin says The Rock was hated at the start and had to win over the audience. See?
Yeah, it is very true. They tried to push him as what they call a baby face or a good guy, and everyone pushed against it because they didn't like him. Again, how the audience is part of the story. And so he finally was like, hey, I should just lean into this and be a bad guy. And so he went and he got on the microphone and told everybody to stop chanting that Rocky sucks and he hates them just as much as you hate him. And the rest is history from there.
Jeremy has a comment. Joe's fave is Val Venus. One, I don't even know who that is, but I'm sure this is some type of insult.
I could explain, but his gimmick was that he was a porn star. So from the Attitude Era.
Okay. It's family friendly. Go watch.
Now it is. Not back then. When we were watching, we were teenagers. It was not as family friendly. It was supposed to be as off the wall, meant for teenagers and college kids that they could watch and be like, oh, did you see that crazy stuff? They were chugging beers and all this other stuff. So yeah.
I think my least favorite was I can't remember exactly how his name was, like Rafiki or Rikishi, something like that.
Rikishi, yeah.
Yes, but he was just so like his signature move was throwing him in the corner and like rubbing his butt in their face. I was like, well,
yes, that's what it was. Yes.
Nathan's face is like. Steven just commented, "Hello, ladies." I assume that's maybe something from Val Venus. Maybe
that was his. Yeah, that's what he said on the microphone. That was his catchphrase. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Kevin comments, cough, gold dust, cough. Oh, the guy with the glitter like paint on his face, is that
Correct. Yeah, and he was playing on transgenderism back in the day, before it got to where it is today.
Oh. So who are the anchor wrestlers for WWE? Like who is the face of it, and then who's the face of AEW?
So the face of WWE right now is Roman Reigns. I don't know if either of you guys have heard of him. He's a part of the whole, which was The Rock, Rikishi, the whole Samoan dynasty family that's out there. So he's been WWE champion for over 1,000 days, which is kind of unheard of in modern day wrestling. Usually they switch champions every few months. If you get to a year, that's insane. And he's been the champion for over 3 years now. He just got pinned for the first time in 3 years by his cousin Jay Uso, who is Rikishi's son. So again, how the family lineage, it's a family business type thing. So he's the main face of WWE now, and John Cena will come back from time to time, but he's doing more acting stuff. I know that they want The Rock to come back really badly to have a match with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, because they're a part of the same family, and it's the star power of The Rock and the star power of Roman Reigns meeting at WrestleMania. They think that would be the best thing ever. And then below Roman Reigns is Cody Rhodes, I would say, for the face of WWE. Roman Reigns is like the main bad guy. Cody Rhodes is the main good guy right now. Cody Rhodes is Dusty Rhodes' son. If you remember from back in the day in the 80s, the son of a plumber, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. He had a lot of feuds with Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat and all them back in the 80s, and Cody's his son. And so he's the main good guy for WWE right now. In AEW right now, their main guy is Kenny Omega. He is more of he's more known in the independent scene. He wrestled a lot in Japan and the other smaller promotions around America. And then when AEW started, he finally got like a mainstream audience to be able to see what he does. And he's kind of beloved by all the internet wrestling community for his abilities in the ring and what he can do in the matches that he puts on. And CM Punk actually switched over to AEW after a while. He was really big in WWE for a few years before walking out on the company and retiring for a while. So he kind of got like this mythical legend to him for sticking it to WWE and leaving.
So we got a comment from Jeremy. He wants to hear from all of us. So what would like to hear from all three. What would your wrestling name be?
Oh, I want to hear your guys' first. I want to hear this.
Nate, go first.
I'll go first before Jeremy can put in there and tell me I can't say Nate Zilla, but I'm gonna go with Nate Zilla.
Okay. Maybe something like the Silent Assassin or something like that. Something cheesy because I'm quiet a lot.
I'm probably going to be boring and just go with my normal name. Back when they had the wrestling video games, though, I used to make X Kid instead of X Pac as my guy and your creator wrestler. So that's what I did. I made a guy to be in DX, and I called him X Kid for all the wrestling games. So I guess I can go with that too.
When I played the wrestling games, I just kind of use what I use as my gamer tag now, which is just the Jewel. So it's just my last name. But I guess it could.
I mean, Joe, you could do that. Just
that would work. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, just have be blinged. Yeah, be blinged out like crazy. Yeah.
That works, Joe. That's the best one, and you were just gonna skip it.
Look, I made my character like super swole and athletic, and like I never lost a match. Like, come on.
Oh my gosh. So you got X Kid. I mean, that's pretty cool. That's all right, you know.
Yeah.
I take nothing against your names. I just don't like normal names as like wrestling names. I guess like I don't know. I guess Roman Reigns is fine. Whoever that is, it sounds decent. But like,
I think Goldberg, The Big Show, Sting, like.
Well, Goldberg was his real name. His name is Bill Goldberg, so that was his real name. But no, so it's interesting that you bring that up because that was actually a big shift in the 90s in wrestling. So in the 80s and early 90s, you had the Hulk Hogan's, the Ultimate Warriors, Macho Man's, all those larger-than-life characters. In the 90s, for the Attitude Era and WCW, they wanted to make it more realistic. and more with like characters that people could connect with. So they started using a lot of their real names or names that were kind of a change on their first name. So like Steve Austin's real name is Steve Williams, but they just made it Steve Austin. And then, you know, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, all this stuff. And it made a way for the fans to be able to connect with them more. So they weren't these superhero characters. They were just like, oh no, this is some guy I could meet on the street and have a drink with, or, you know, it's a guy who, you know, I can run into out in this world.
We got a comment from Steve. Visualizing Joe in bedazzled leggings. Thanks for that, guys. Oh man.
I mean, I feel like that's a thing. I don't know why, but I feel like Joe has some leggings, and we could probably get Nicole to bedazzle them and make an appearance on our next podcast.
I think I'll pass on that one.
You don't have like an 80s costume for like an 80s concert back there with some like hot pink leggings that you can throw on?
I had some joggers that were like not bedazzled, but they were like glitter almost, that I wore as like a joke one time, as like it was like Decades Day at karate, so I just kind of wore them. They were super shiny and stuff. But that would probably work. It's close.
That would work, yeah, definitely, yeah.
The question I have for you is, like, when I was growing up, there was a bunch of different ones like NWO, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
how did those compare to like the WWF, WWE, that kind of stuff? Was there a favorite character you had in those, or is it more of just, you know, something that you didn't really get into?
So the big thing in the 90s was what they deemed the Monday Night Wars, which was WWE versus WCW. So every Monday night, both of them were on at the same time, and you were flipping back between channels, between Monday Night Raw for WWE and Monday Night Nitro for WCW. So NWO was a part of WCW. They had, you know, Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and all that. So that's what kind of fostered a lot of fandom for a lot of the generation of people that are my age that are still fans, because that was kind of the peak or pinnacle of pro wrestling, a lot of people will say, just because the amount of viewers they were getting every week watching those two shows was insane. They'll never hit those numbers again, and they kind of admit that. And so you had your Stings in WCW, you had Ric Flair and the NWO. In WWE, you had The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, DX, you know, the Nation of Domination, all those people. So for WCW, my favorite was obviously Sting, when he was like kind of in the Crow character, when he like didn't talk and had the white and black face paint and the trench coat and the bat.
I was actually going to talk about that. Some of the stuff that I remember, what little bit I've seen, like two things stick out to me in a big way. The Sting dude, right? Because I always liked the Crow movie, you know, I always thought it was good. I always just put them together, right? And then who has not been mentioned on here yet, and I'm kind of shocked, Rey Mysterio Jr., the whole mask thing, like removing his mask and stuff like that. Like, I feel like what little bit I've seen, that was always a big thing. And then that dude was so cool. Like, you know, just watching what he was able to do, I was like, he's amazing.
Yeah, so that whole part of WCW, which was like what they called the cruiserweight division, or the smaller guys, quote unquote, like the Rey Mysterios, the Juventud Guerreras, Psychosis, all that. Even Chris Jericho, that's where he started out. He's still wrestling. So is Rey Mysterio, by the way, too. He's still wrestling in WWE. They were the ones kind of pushing that envelope to see that kind of wrestling that hadn't been shown in America before. They kind of got their start in Mexico and Japan and doing all the kind of crazy jumps off the ropes, all the lucha libre style from Mexico over there, and brought it to an American audience that had never seen it before. And to have that platform starting out those WCW shows to show it, they got so much fandom and so much push from everybody, because it was something no one had ever seen before, and it was really, really cool to watch. So I grew up in South Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. And so another promotion around that time was ECW, or Extreme Championship Wrestling. And so they kind of got started on an underground level, and they were just on a cable access channel. Well, when they started at like 9 or 10 o'clock, they like convinced somebody to give them a time slot when they definitely shouldn't have been on TV with the stuff they were doing. But I still remember being like a 9-year-old, like flipping through the channels, like when I turned off a video game, and seeing this on cable access and seeing Rey Mysterio on there as like a 9-year-old doing this Mexican death pit match, which was just like a concrete pit where they were like jumping from the top of it onto each other. It was concrete. It was insane. And I remember this as like a 9-year-old, and it was a part of what like hooked you in at that point. Like, what are these people doing?
That sounds brutal. My body thinking about it. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine being 30 and 40 and doing this stuff. Like I get out of bed and I'm like, ooh, my back. You know, these people get like slammed and that's wild. Oh my gosh.
Kevin commented, Macho Man will always be my favorite because of the energy he brought, including how he spoke. Also, the Spider-Man cameo is bombs off. It's funny. I just remember Macho Man is like snapping to a Slim Jim like that. Like that's the main thing.
It's probably what he'll go down for too. Everyone will remember him for that.
And then Jeremy come in and said Wolfpack. I don't remember Wolfpack.
So in WCW, when the NWO split, there were 2 sectors of it. There was the black and white NWO that had Hogan and all of his people. And then Kevin Nash and Scott Hall went over to the Wolfpack, which was the black and red. And they were like the really cool version. And they had Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Sting, Lex Luger, and all those fun people for a little while.
Okay.
And their music was pretty cool too. I remember their music being fun.
I feel like growing up doing whatever was a thing, and I feel like that came from that. Like I said, I grew up in Alabama, so a lot of the people I know. So like, I just feel like I remember like middle schooler being like woo woo whatever, you know. So
that is called the Too Sweet, is what they have deemed it. So that is correct. Yeah.
Too sweet.
Yeah.
Man, well, quick question, Mike. You said right outside of Philly in Jersey, Merchantville by chance? I was there the other day.
So Medford, Cherry Hill area, right?
I was in Cherry Hill. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. Well, I don't really have a lot of questions, and I know we've ran over time. I feel like we should just extend our time. We run over every episode now. I know we try to stick to 30. But Joe, you got any other questions or anything?
No, man. I just definitely appreciate coming on, speaking with us. It's been fun.
Yeah, no,
Mike,
I appreciate
you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
See you.